guys, Chef Ana Dominguez here, and welcome back to another Chef Share session, Fall 2021. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make pate choux, also known as eclair paste or choux paste. So choux paste is a very famous European pastry, but it's really used for a bunch of multiple purposes throughout the world, in different cultures, in different countries, all right? So it is a paste that it's first cooked on the stovetop, and then we pass it to our mixer, and then we continue the process there. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we do have a pot, and we are gonna start to put our ingredients in. We're gonna add our water. Notice I do have my flame off just for precaution. And we're gonna add our fat. Now, you're gonna find different recipes. Now I'm gonna turn up the heat. To this, I'm gonna add some salt, so it doesn't taste just bland, all right? Now, you're gonna find different recipes depending on the purpose of making the pate choux, because pate choux is used for making a bunch of pastries, not just one. It can make cream puffs, it can make eclairs, it can make religieux, it can make Paris brest, all right? So it depends on the purpose. You're gonna find different recipes. There are recipes that only use water. You're gonna have a final product that's gonna be really crispy, as opposed to some other recipes that use half water, half milk, which is gonna give you a little bit more of a soft final product. There's recipes that use only milk, which again, it's gonna give you a product that's gonna be very soft. Also, right now I added butter, but it can also be shortening or other type of fat, all right? So you're gonna wait until the fat melts into the water, and you're gonna have to wait for this to boil. It has to boil. You have to see those bubbles coming up in order for you to do the next step, which is gonna be adding our flour. Now, for this purpose, I do have a wooden spoon, because this mixture is gonna start to get really thick. And if you're using something as such as a metal spatula, which I don't recommend because it can also get really hot, you can bend it, all right? Especially with the heat. Or if you're using a rubber spatula, sometimes it can bend too, so that's why you need something a little bit more sturdier, like a wooden spoon. So just again, right now my water's boiling. I'm just waiting for that fat to melt down within my liquid. Once that fat is melted, since it's already boiling, I'm gonna go ahead and add my flour. Now, anytime you are cooking flour, it gets really hot, just like if you were making a roux to thicken a soup or a sauce. Okay, it's completely boiling right now, and my fat's melted, so I'm gonna go ahead and move it out of the fire so you don't have an accident. Add your flour. In this case, this recipe calls for bread flour. It could be AP or pastry. Again, it's gonna depend on the final product you're gonna have. And you're gonna vigorously stir it to make a ball. If you want to lower your fire to have a little bit more control and to prevent, again, any accident, you can do so. And this is why we need a wooden spoon, because you really have to be aggressive mixing this. You are gonna want for you not to see any clumps of flour or any white flour that it's not getting mixed in there. And you wanna continue to cook it in the fire. The point here is that you're trying to cook out moisture out of this, all right? If you don't cook enough moisture out, what's gonna end up happening is that you're gonna have a very soft paste, and it's gonna be very hard for you to pipe it. All right, so just a little bit more, just as long as it comes together like you're seeing it right here. Sometimes I like to wait even for the pan to, the sediments in the pan to get a little bit brown, just so I know that I cooked enough moisture out. So right now I think it's looking good. Again, you have to be aggressive. It is a very thick paste. Another reason why I don't recommend making absurdly large batches at a time, because it can get really tough. So at this point, it is done. It is cooked. I already turned on my fire. It's forming a ball. I think I've cooked enough moisture, judging by how my pan looks in the bottom. So what I have to do now is I'm gonna go and deposit this dough into a mixer with a paddle attachment, and we'll go from there. All right, now that we have our dough cooked, we're gonna transfer it to our KitchenAid. Again, be very careful. This preparation, it's really, really hot. All right, we are gonna set the paddle attachment on our KitchenAid. Now, because it is really hot, the next step is to add the eggs one by one. But because it's really hot, if you do it too quick and right away, you might end the risk of cooking the eggs. So we're gonna start it off at speed 1, or just stir for a couple of minutes, depending on the amount. Sometimes it can take 2 minutes. This is a very small amount, so it's gonna take a little bit less. But you can see all the vapor coming out. This is because, again, it's really, really hot. So a little bit of a trick to know when you can start adding your eggs is just to touch the bottom of the bowl. And if it's too hot for you to keep your hand there, it's too hot for the eggs. So just let it run like that. Keep testing it to see if it's still too hot. So right now, it is too hot. I can't really leave my hand in there. So I'm gonna run it a little bit longer while I talk about the eggs. So we're gonna start to add the eggs, and you're gonna see how they incorporate. If you add too many at a time, your dough is gonna have a very hard time to incorporate them into itself. So that's why you wanna do it one by one. Now, in this case, and this recipe uses whole eggs. There's recipes that you're gonna find that can use only egg yolks. Again, that's gonna give you a richer product and a very soft product. And there's also recipes that only use egg whites. That's gonna give you a very crispy texture at the end. An example, it's, for example, this same dough, it's also used to make churros, a very, very famous Mexican dessert. They're made the same way. The only difference is, yes, we use water, we use shortening, and then we only use egg whites. That way it's a better product for us to fry, and the end result is something that's very, very crispy, right? So right now, as you can see, I can leave my hand. It's still hot, mind, it's still hot, but I can leave my hand in there without it hurting, all right? So I'm gonna start to add my eggs. And again, you wanna add, depending on the amount that you're making, you do wanna be mindful of the amount that you're adding, because as you can see right now, it does take a little bit to incorporate into itself. So you do wanna wait to add the second addition until it has been fully incorporated, all right? I am gonna add just another one, but then I'm gonna wait until it's fully incorporated. You can speed it up a little bit. And you can see it's gonna take a while for it to actually come together. Just be patient. Like with anything in pastry, you just have to be patient. And it's also a very important step of the process. This pastry dough, it's very simple to make. It only has its tricky parts as cooking enough moisture out when you're cooking it in the stovetop, and this part, adding the eggs slowly and in parts, that way it can incorporate together. Something you can do to help those eggs to be fully incorporated into the dough is we're gonna actually scrape the bottom of our bowl, because there is part of the dough that it's gonna get stuck to the sides of the bowl, and it's not gonna permit that fully incorporation. So again, I'm just gonna scrape the sides and the bottom of my bowl. You're starting to see how it's kind of getting together. Let's do that one more time. And it's looking more like a dough, all right? Again, you do have to wait until it's the first addition is fully incorporated for you to add the second part. Patience. All right, so as you can see, it looks more like the dough, so I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 more eggs. In this case, I had 3 eggs, so I always like to make at least 3 additions. So I had 6 eggs in this recipe, two the first time, two the second, and then I'll do two at last. Also, another thing is that depending on the amount of moisture that you cooked out in the stove, sometimes you leave a little bit more, sometimes you leave a little bit less, sometimes you can go overboard and actually see the bottom of your pan starting to get brown, so that means you cooked even more moisture out. So sometimes it can happen that you actually need a little bit less of an egg. Let's say this recipe called for 6 eggs, but I cooked it way too long in the stovetop, so I cooked too much moisture out. It is gonna need the 6 eggs, but if I cook less, it might need a little bit less. So we always recommend checking the dough after the second addition, just to make sure that it does in fact need the rest of the eggs. And I'll explain myself a little bit better. Let's scrape this down. You'll be able to see it, what I'm talking about, to determine if it does need the eggs. Once you're very familiar with the recipe and very familiar with the process, then you really don't have to test it and guesstimate if you need the rest of the eggs or not. You're just gonna be able to know because you know the recipe. But better be safe than sorry. Let's just make sure. So I'm just gonna wait for this to be fully incorporated. And what we're gonna do to know if we need the rest of the eggs or not, it's make a quick test. What you do, it's once the second addition or your third addition, if you reserve some eggs, after that, after the mixture is fully incorporated, we're gonna grab some with our spatula. And if it falls off of the spatula within 3 seconds to our bowl, that means it's ready and you don't have to add any more eggs or any more liquids. If it doesn't, that means it does need the extra moisture, it does need the extra eggs. So right now it's fully incorporated. So let's do that test. So we have our dough, and I'm gonna take it out just so you can see. All right, so what you wanna do for that test, it's grab part of your dough, all right? You have to lift your spoon, and if the dough falls off of your spatula within 3 seconds, which right now it's been like 6, that means your dough doesn't need the extra eggs, but it hasn't. So we are gonna go ahead and add the extra eggs. Hopefully once I add them, and they are fully incorporated and we do this test again, you'll be able to see what I was talking about. Put it back together. And let's do the last addition, which is our 2 eggs, which, like I said, they need to be there. And let's wait for them to be fully incorporated. This is probably the one that's gonna take a little bit longer to get incorporated, because the dough now it's completely cooled down because of the temperature of the eggs. Something other that really helps, it's having, if you wait enough time for your dough to get cool, having eggs at room temperature, it's gonna help for the whole dough to incorporate faster. But if you don't wanna wait so long for the dough to get cooled down, then having cold eggs, it's gonna help the preparation to cool down. Right, so I'm seeing that it's being fully incorporated. I'm just gonna again scrape it down for all the parts in the sides and the bottom of the bowl that are not getting incorporated well enough. Scrape it down. We'll start again for a final mix, just to make sure it's well enough incorporated. It's looking good, but I'm still gonna do the test. And again, you're gonna find different recipes, but typically, for it to have a piping consistency, you should pass that test. All right, I'm gonna remove it, just so we can test it. See? 1, 2, 3. It's not falling, but I think it should be enough. That part fell, so I'm gonna take that as a yes. but you can see how, oh, there you go. You can see how it's a little bit more fluid, right? So we should be good. All right, now the next step is to put it in a piping bag with the appropriate tip for whatever product you're doing, because again, you can do eclairs, which is gonna be a star tip, or I prefer a French star tip. We can make cream puffs, which is something is that we're actually gonna do, that you would need a round tip. You can make Paris breast, you will need a French star tip, or you can do a bunch of things. If you're making churros, a star tip, but let's put it in piping back to the appropriate tip for the product that we're gonna make. All right, the next step is to put our dough in the appropriate piping bag for the piping tip for the product that we're doing. I do have a French star tip to show you just how to pipe eclairs, and I do have a round tip just to make some cream puffs, all right? So I'm gonna put some dough in both of them, and I'll show you the piping. While I'm showing you the piping, I want to share with you just a personal tip from places I've worked that make my life way easier when piping. This is just for about 2 eclairs. It's a very small amount. You do want to make sure that you don't have air bubbles once I'm piping, if I have any, which is probably going to happen. You'll see why, all right? But you want to prevent any air bubbles, because while piping Pate choux, anything that it's wrongfully piped, it's gonna show up in the oven, all right? So this dough, once it goes into the oven, just like one of the names says, cream puffs, it puffs, all right? It puffs, it expands, and it bakes hollow in the middle. So you can use a different variety of fillings. But any mistake that you make at piping, it's gonna be exacerbated once you bake it, all right? So that's why we want to prevent any air bubbles so our piping can go good. All right. Again, I'm just doing this to possibly eliminate a lot of air bubbles. Another good tip is, and a lot of bakers do it, they first fill a bag, and then they take that piping bag and pipe it into the bag that has the tip, all right? That double bagging, per se, it helps to reduce those air bubbles because they're really annoying, and you'll see why. All right. First of all, this is one of the tips I wanted to give you. It's kind of hard, especially when you're barely starting. A lot of the things you get just by repetition and experience and practice, it's very hard to make them and pipe them the same length, the same size. So what I do to prevent that is that I use templates. I have here a parchment paper that has the size already marked. That way I know when to start, when to finish, and they're all gonna be the same size. Very obviously, the marker, it's on the other side. That way, no contamination here. I did put a tape so I can slide it off once I'm done. Obviously, you can make this out of cardboard. That would be even better. That way it's resistant. You can probably put plastic over them, more resistant. And then you're gonna put your other piece of parchment on top, or your parchment on top, and you're gonna be able to see through, all right? Again, these markings help you to know where to start, when to stop. For piping eclairs, and again, like I said, Pate choux, it's a very, it's easy to make, it's a little bit harder to pipe. You have to have a sturdy hand, and you have to make it right, because if you don't, once you put them in the oven, they bake really, really weird. So for making eclairs, all you have to do is a straight line, but it is important the amount of pressure that you're putting. Make sure all the way through that you're piping, you're putting the same amount of pressure. Otherwise, if you put too much pressure at the beginning and then continue and stop, you're gonna, once you bake them, they look like peanuts. So it looks fatter at the beginning, and then it gets thinner, and then it gets fat at the end. So all you have to do is really make sure that you're putting the same amount of pressure all the way through. This is my end line. So I'm gonna end it right now. All right, again, you're trying to make just straight lines with the same amount of pressure to end. Let me Sometimes it's easy to, with a paper towel, clean your piping bag. You also don't want to bake them too close together because they do puff. Right there, I have an air bubble, so I'm gonna actually have to stop it there. And that's why we don't like air bubbles, because if you have one, you have to scrape it out. Now, this might take a little bit of practice for you to get them straight, the same size. Don't be afraid to even make a dough to just practice. If you get an air bubble at the middle and you have to scrape it down, nothing happens. Take a bowl scraper, scrape that piece out, put it back in your bowl, and then you can repipe it as many times as you want, just making sure that they're actually straight and pretty. All right, I'm gonna do one last one or two, just so we can bake them. And again, these ones are eclairs. Steady hand, all right? With any patty choux that you make, you are gonna want to bake it at a high temperature. And there's gonna be a point where they're gonna get a really nice golden brown color, but they're still a little bit raw in the middle. So it depends on your recipe and the amount that you're baking, but you're gonna have to start them at a high temperature. And once you see that they're getting golden brown and delicious, you have to lower the temperature. And you have to keep checking them to see if they're already hollow and baked in the inside. If not, what you can do is you can crack open the door of your oven and let them dry out, all right? With the template, the templates that I use, let's pretend that our sheet pan is full, but all you have to do, it's basically hold on to the parchment where you piped, take the stencil out, and that's it. This is a really cool way for you to make sure that you're making them the same size and you're having consistency. Now I'm gonna jump to cream puffs. And this is, again, I do have a template at the bottom because I want to make sure that I make them all the same size. Not just because I'm perfectionist and I want consistency, but if you don't make them the same size, they're not going to bake at the same time. They're not going to be ready at the same time. So that's another reason why you really want to make sure that you're making them the same size. So for cream puffs, you just have to make sure to envision, if you don't have a template, envision a circle, the size that you want. You're gonna pipe right down the middle without being afraid. We can fix that with a little bit of water. And you're basically just piping rounds. All right, again, try to make them exactly the same size. And we can get one more probably. Yeah. Now, for cream puffs, you can potentially bake them just like this. It's gonna be perfectly fine. They are gonna explode like clouds. That's basically, or brains. I don't know how to describe it, but probably a better word is clouds. But they are gonna have a very irregular shape. All right? There's nothing wrong with baking them like this. Profiteroles, which are cream puffs but a little bit smaller. Once they're baked, they're filled with chantilly cream. They're dipped. The point is dipped in ganache, and it's a very, very famous dessert, especially in Paris. Those are baked exactly like this, and they do like little clouds. Now, for cream puffs, I like to do sort of a trick to make them bake more evenly and more of the same size. What I do is I put a piece of a simple 1, 2, 3 cookie on top, which is called craqueline. And that basically, once it goes into the oven, it encapsulates the cream puffs and it makes them bake very, very even and very, very pretty. This is for the purpose of you having to make your tests here to pass. They are gonna look for consistency, for them to be the same size, for them to look exactly the same. So it's just a tip that you can do for your test. That way you make sure that you're actually giving a really good product. So I have the cookie dough already made, and it's nothing but a 1, 2, 3 cookie. That means it's just butter, brown sugar, and flour creamed together. We already made a video on how to make cookies. if you want to go and look at that one. It's from the summer 2021. And all you have to do is make that cookie dough, flatten it in between parchment papers, use a round cutter to mark them, and then you're gonna have little cookie discs that we're gonna put on top of this. So let's do that right now. All right, here I have my cookie discs ready. Again, I just flattened the cookie dough in between parchment paper. I marked them with a circle cutter, and then I put them in the freezer. So these are frozen hard. All you have to do is place a cookie on top of your cream puffs. And right after this, we're gonna go to the oven. Again, we're gonna bake this at 350 for about 20 minutes. We're gonna go check them. And then if they are already starting to get color, we're gonna lower the temperature to 325, and we're just gonna keep an eye on them until they are dry inside, right? That's it. This is gonna give you a really nice product. Now let's go to the oven. All right, now all we have to do is go put them in the oven, so let's go. All right, so it's been about 25 minutes at 350. Then I looked at them. I lowered the temperature to 325. Took about 10 minutes, and then all I did to dry them out is I did left them with the oven door crack open just like that for about another 10 minutes, just so they were completely done. Let's take them out. And this is how they're gonna look. Right, as you can see, the cookie on top encapsulates the cream puff, and it helps for them to be uniform in size, the same size, and it helps with a better product, final product. All right, and this is how they're gonna look. It was about 20-25 minutes at 350, and then I looked at them. They were starting to get golden brown, so I lowered the temperature to 325 for another about 7 to 10 minutes, and then what I did is I cracked the door open, and I left it like that for another 10 minutes, just so they were dry on the inside. All right, and this is what I'm talking about. The cookie that we put on top, it basically encapsulated the cream puff, making them not explode in a very crazy shape, but more like a round shape. This helps a lot with uniformity, with them looking all the same. Right? So that's why we like putting that cookie on top. But again, you can also bake them without the cookie, and everything would be, they're just all gonna be very different. But that's the way they've made them for years, so that would be fine too. So the last thing will be to actually fill them, because this is just the pastry, but it has no flavor. It has a little bit of an egg flavor, but the filling that you put, it's what's gonna give it all the magic, right? So at this point, with this ones, you can cut the tops out, fill them, and then put the cap on, or you can fill them from the bottom. As you can see, they are completely hollow. So this is where the filling goes. This is where the yumminess goes. If you made eclairs, you fill them too. You can put ganache on top, or you can decorate them really nice. If you made profiteroles, you fill them with chantilly. You will coat them with ganache. So it's just a world of possibilities with pate choux, because you can also use them for savory purposes. If you make this version but smaller without the cookies, you can fill them with salmon mousse. You can fill them with cream cheese and chives. There's a million possibilities with pate choux. It's such a versatile pastry dough to make. All right, so have fun, practice. The piping does takes a little bit of technique and repetition, but it is such a wonderful dough to make. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining these Chef Search sessions, and see you in the next one.